Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, spiritual life coach and your host of Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, sensuality and soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. Before this episode, I just want to share with you some ways that I can support you. Firstly, tune in to Her Inspirations, which is the sister podcast to this title, where in each episode I explore with you a different aspect of our spiritual and creative journeys. Also, if you join the mailing list, you'll receive exclusive emails with additional teaching points and resources for you to explore deeper on your own personal journey. If you're someone who has always wanted to be heard in the world, and whether that means you're launching your podcast, stepping out into social media and online spaces or public speaking, or maybe you just want to be able to show up and be more vocal in your life, I've created Your Awakened Voice for you. This is my course which uses my holistic approach, acknowledging the intricate connection between your physical body, mind and spirit. This course empowers you to discover and develop your voice. Or you may want a more personalized experience and choose to work with me on a one-to-one basis. And this is especially for you conscious creators. If you know there is a purpose to your life, my purpose is to support you to confidently follow your intuition and create your big vision. All the links to these are in the show notes. My guest this week is Christina Fontana, a pharmacist turned full-time entrepreneur, holistic healer, author, speaker, and rapid transformation business coach. She helps spiritually driven women release self-sabotage to step into more purpose, power, and prosperity. During our conversation, Christina shares how she transformed from being homeless and broke in 2012 to creating a 7-figure business, helping healers in healthcare create profitable healing businesses that then have a domino effect of healing the world. And as always, I begin by asking my guest, HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel that higher energetic resonance?
So when do I feel it? I think that I feel most energetically aligned when I'm speaking. I feel like I'm channeling, or like when I'm coaching. I think that that's a big, I just always open myself up to what God, source, spirit wants to channel through me. Like I'm giving a talk tomorrow and I always pray before I do those talks. And I think that's really where my true essence shines through, is speaking this podcast. I don't have to prep. I'm just like, God, channel through me.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. Love it. Thank you. And before we go deeper into the conversation, Christina, I just want to give you an opportunity to share about your story and how you got to be doing the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, I actually believe my belief is that we choose our soul path before we even enter the womb. Like there's this soul contract. And I believe that we actually choose our parents. So I believe that I had a contract with my soul family, with my parents specifically, to go through certain things that I had to in order to evolve into the healer that I am. And of course, we're always healing and evolving. I'm not saying that I'm at a destination, but I know that I can look back on my life and see that there's a thread of themes that have happened that have led me to this point. And so I grew up with a very strict, controlling father who had come from a line of abuse. So his dad abused him, I'm sure his dad, and so on. And so we were abused. My siblings and I, verbally, physically, there was a lot of emotional abuse that went on, a lot of stonewalling and silent treatment. We were taught to suppress our needs and suppress our emotions. And I was highly sensitive. So that was the worst thing. So I think that growing up in that environment, I personally took a lot of that energy, that abusive energy, and put it on myself. So I didn't get angry at other people. I was abusive to my body. I wound up developing an eating disorder at 14, anorexia. And then in college, it kind of went the opposite way. So I started binging at night, and it was so uncontrollable. I felt just completely powerless to it. I would get up in the middle of the night, and it was almost like something came over my body that made me go do this, compulsive eating. And I had that for 7 years. My parents didn't really know how to help me. And so I had to kind of push through at that point because I was in pharmacy school. And then eventually it got to the point where I couldn't anymore, right? We get to that breaking point of this isn't workable and like something needs to change. So there were many teachers and many guides along the way, in addition to people who were unofficial teachers that have really helped me see almost like a mirror of the aspects of myself that I really needed to heal. So unworthiness, the pieces of me that felt unworthy, ashamed, the controlling aspects of myself were all mirrored through relationships. And I had to learn and really heal and feel through a lot of that through those various relationships. And eventually I was led onto this path to be able to heal myself through that eating disorder, through a lot of these survival patterns that I had developed. And it's why I do the work that I do now. So really, like I have many titles. I'm a business coach. I was a former pharmacist, all of these different things, but really I'm a conduit of healing. That's really why I feel God put me on this planet, going back to, I'm 35 weeks pregnant right now, and my little baby already has a soul path. I believe that. And I think that my message for people is always that there is hope and healing, no matter how debilitating something might feel, or if you're struggling with, your health or relationships or business, whatever that is. I want people to walk away knowing that everything, your character is being molded. And if you can really step into that level of empowerment to take ownership of the fact that you are a powerful creator, there's nothing you can't do. So that's just the beginning. That's like my intro.
Right, love it. What I wanted to ask you is, what was your turning point? What was the thing that kind of changed the gears on the direction that you saw that you were going in? And was there like a moment, or, was it a moment that was instigated from something internally, or was it something externally that you went, hang on a minute, if I take one more step in that direction, what was that for you?
The fork in the road. Yeah, that's a really great question. So in my 5th year of pharmacy school, so pharmacy school in the US is 6 years. It's either a 0 to 6 program or like 2 years and then another 4. Mine was a 0 to 6. So we just went straight through. And my dad was a pharmacist. He owned his own pharmacy, and they wanted him and my family wanted me to essentially, after pharmacy school, go work at that store. And I just felt in my gut. And that was really when I started to feel the presence of God, because I grew up kind of being, like we would go to church every so often, but it wasn't really something that, like, we weren't like devout Christians, or like my dad wasn't a pastor or anything like that. But I always felt this presence when I was in church. It was like this, like tingling all over my body. And it was just, I don't know. I knew that there was a presence there. I knew that there was something that I was ready to connect with, but it wasn't until that time that I'm talking about where I really felt a presence come over me. And it was almost this voice. I remember being in meditation one day, and it was like, you need to, I don't remember the exact wording, but it was like, you're destined for more. Like, you could take this path And I kind of described a little bit about the abusive dynamic that was already existent and, dysfunctional in my family. So my mom, my dad, and my sister worked at the pharmacy. And I knew that in my gut, that wasn't really what I wanted to do. So it was that fork in the road, like, okay, I can go down this path and be miserable, or I can listen to this voice. It was very quiet and peaceful, ushering me into this new experience of, I wanted to pursue a residency after pharmacy school. And of course, my parents weren't happy about that. They were like, you're betraying us. And they were really angry. And I was living in the house at the time with them. And I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells. So I had to go on Xanax. I was like just trying to survive. I was in total survival mode because I also had that eating disorder. So I had the eating disorder, anxiety. I'm like trying to figure out my life path. And all the while, like I had never been on a real like job interview. So I'm trying to go down this path that is so unfamiliar, so unknown, but I did it. And I just kept, even though there were all of these voices, shame, guilt, fear, all of that fearful projection, that quiet moment, like such a great question, that quiet moment where I connected with that voice, I knew I was on like a thread of something much bigger, like a bigger plan for my life. So I followed it. And I did wind up getting a new opportunity, a residency. And at that time was when my parents actually, they were so infuriated with me that I had definitively chosen this path, that my mom had texted me and said, you better come get all your stuff because we're throwing you out of the house. So I had to go home, rush home. And I had a tiny Mazda 3 sedan. It was like a little gray car. And so all of my stuff was on the lawn. So I had my shoes and coats and hangers and everything was just literally thrown onto the lawn. And I had to get leaf bags, like clear leaf bags, and try to stuff them in this tiny car. And I had to go multiple trips. I had to go fold up my clothes into these like, it was like a vacuum suction bag to like try to stuff as much as I could. And I was literally living out of my car for 2 weeks. So I had a friend who I stayed with at that time because I was 23. So not many people have their own apartment at that time, but I was fortunate that I knew someone that I could kind of stay. I would have to go outside in the morning and like search through all my clothes and try to find like a matching shirt and pants and all of that. And so it was very traumatic, in that moment to literally have everything that I've ever owned or everything that was familiar to me be purged onto the ground. So that was really my rock bottom moment of like, I can't go on like this, and I'm ready for something new. I'm ready to build something new. So, yeah.
Wow. Thanks for sharing. It's a big moment. The thing that was coming through as a question to ask it, like one, what is the situation with your family now? Do you have contact with them or not?
Yeah. So people always ask that question. So this was back in 2012, and it did take time to heal that relationship because there was a lot of animosity, mainly on their side. Because like I said, with every trauma I've ever had, I take it on. I'm not like, oh my God, look at what they did. I'm like, oh, I'm bad, right? So I absorb all that. So I easily, not easily, but like it was easier for me to forgive them than to forgive myself. And so I was dating these unavailable men who were very abusive because I was holding on to that guilt. And so subconsciously, I didn't think I deserved good things because I had done this horrible thing of leaving this, the family pharmacy. So I tell that because I think so often we don't realize that we're playing out these energetic dynamics in every area of our lives, depending on what emotions are undigested in our body. And for me, it was guilt. And so it wasn't until I got coaching around that and was able to forgive myself and free myself from that, then I was able to then take ownership of my life, call my parents and say, I apologize for, if I misled you in any way. I took ownership from my side of the fence and I said, I love you, and so that is hard to do to people who have, had such a traumatic impact on me, but I didn't want to hold on to that anymore. I didn't want to be a victim anymore. I wanted to take my power back. And so I think that was the biggest, that was like 2014. So maybe 2 years after. And then we were able to slowly repair from there. So yeah, they had to just accept it. I think they felt out of control and wanted me to stay safe and didn't know how to express it.
It's good that you were able to kind of mend something there as well. And so are they able to now see the reasons why you did what you did and what it's created for you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think my dad was very much an independent thinker, him and I are very similar, which is like usually when you butt heads. But he thought I was crazy, for a while. And I think that now that I've been a full-time entrepreneur for 5 years, that they can kind of see, wow, she's really serious about this. She's passionate. She can make a living out of this, because I have not drawn a paycheck from a pharmacist job in 5 years. So I think it just, again, parents try to protect us and they don't always know how to do it in the right way. Because my dad grew up and my mom grew up in very abusive households. So they don't know how to deal with emotions and, be aware or anything like that. So I think it's, it's just tough in those situations.
Gosh, thank you. So when we were speaking before as well, like moving on to the entrepreneurial life that you've created for yourself, you spoke about the 3 steps or the 3 phases that you have created around like an ascension process in business. And I'd like for you to speak about that, because what I'm recognizing, I mean, as someone who's been doing my own thing for many a year, balancing it with freelance and contract jobs and everything and moving more into that, now seeing that it's more accepted, but it's kind of more common that people are seeing that the opportunities there exist for them to create something around themselves.
Right.
Whereas I suppose 10 years ago when I kind of started on this whole thing, it was, the idea of a laptop lifestyle seemed like a bit of a joke, and all the ads on mainly YouTube at the time, it's just like someone sitting under the beach with a pina colada and a laptop.
Yeah, laptop lifestyle. I like that.
But now, there are those things, people want to do those businesses, but I think now, especially when we're able to create more soul-led businesses and businesses around our own interests and businesses around our own expression, like who we are as humans and what has come out from you just living your life and all the experiences and seeing how that's possible. And it's just becoming more the language of people who want to go down that road, especially of soulful entrepreneurship. But I want to really find out firstly about this ascension process that you have in business, is 3 steps here.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to take a pause and reflect back to you. I love that idea of the soul-led business, because that's really what I believe we're here for, right? So we all have different gifts. And so when we move through this ascension process, we're essentially merging with the higher version of ourselves. And, when I say this, it's not meant to be like religious or in any way, but like Christ consciousness, if you've heard of that, or like 5D consciousness. So that's kind of what it is. It's 3D, 4D, 5D. So 3D is kind of that first phase where we're still, we're questioning our programming, right? And I can kind of see this in my journey too. And maybe you go through okay, we go through 3 to 4, and then you slide back into 3 a little bit, and then eventually ascend. And sometimes, there's spiritual, emotional, physical versions of this too. So it's like or like related to money. Some people are still in that 3D version of money, that paradigm. So there's no right or wrong. It's just these different phases that we have to go through in order to ascend into our higher self. So the 3D first part is really releasing old programming or old identity. Like I talked about, I was a victim. And as a result, I was abusing my body. I was dating unavailable men. I had a lot of unworthiness around when I started my business 12 years ago, I didn't think like, who am I to charge money for my services? Like all of those beliefs I really had to work through, even at a subconscious and somatic level within my own body, right? Because we hold trauma in the body. So that's really that first phase is releasing and questioning, starting to question things like, oh, I was taught this, but there's a deeper knowing. And I know you and I have talked before that you're really, your mind is just very inquisitive, which I love, because you were taught certain things or you were in certain environments that we've talked about that you started to question things. And that's really the first phase of our awakening, because it's like society, the media, we're all being fed something. But when you start questioning, just like I did in that meditation, like they're telling me this, but I feel this, and I'm going to lean into that. That's really the beginning. So you go through that process of shedding, releasing, questioning, kind of purging this old life. Maybe you start to separate from some of the people that you've associated with in the past, and you talk about her, right? The energetic resonance, you're no longer vibrating at the same frequency. Mm-hmm. Then you're eventually moving up into that second phase, which is really unlocking who you are and starting to uncover more of those soul gifts of why you're here and what your purpose is. Like for me, I'm very intuitive. So I just had a client take somebody through a session. I don't know, I have like an idea of what I want to talk to them about. But as I start feeling into the frequency of what their blind spot is or what their struggle point is, I can ask them certain questions. And I believe it's not me, it's being channeled through. And so channeling, intuition, all of these gifts start coming online because you're clearing out a lot of that energetic density of the black and white thinking, right, wrong, good, bad, all of that. So you have more spaciousness in your aura, in your energy, to then start to really bring these gifts online. And that's where self-expression comes in. Like you talked about self-expression, soul-led self-expression. I think that second phase is really where that starts to come through. And then the third phase is about ownership and embodiment. So owning who you are, not just conceptually, but feeling it somatically in your body and living that out in an everyday realized experience. And I think for me, I'm getting chills as I'm saying this, like it's just such a level of fulfillment that the money is going to come. The support is going to come when you're living from that space of soul-led. I love that word, soul-led business ownership. For me, this is a mission. It's not a business. Like it's way beyond that, because I feel like I said in the beginning, I believe that this is why I'm here. So even though I had a tough morning this morning and I'm 35 weeks pregnant and all these emotions are coming up, I am not going to just abandon this business because it's even bigger than me. So I think when you have that perspective and you really know that you're here for a purpose to make an impact through your self-expression, through your impact, then that's where true fulfillment comes in and true joy. So it's a little bit about it.
Yeah. Oh, I love the way you break it down as well. Like you said, I'm a questioner. Like I've always been like, why? It doesn't make sense. No one's got any answers, because the earlier questions that I always remember is like everyone was being led and directed by they. They say we should do this, we should do that. And then I was like, well, who's they? Like who, like, can we meet they, but
nobody
knew who they was. But yeah, we were like led by this they. I don't know if you've ever heard, it's very old. I don't even know how long it is. Maybe it's about 17 minutes, by Earl Nightingale, The Stranger's Secret. I don't even know if there a video of it, but it's like a crackly, you'll hear it. It's like a crackly 33 like radio,
Yeah.
where he's talking about the strangest secret, and he's like, the strangest secret is that everyone's following everyone and no one really knows where everyone's going, but we're all going in the same direction. No one's asking questions. And I
Yeah.
remember hearing that like years later, after I'd been spending my life asking why, and then asking everyone, going, well, who are we following? And no one really knew, and no one around me ever really knew. But then when I heard this, like years after, that this had been something that had been put out into the public lexicon years back, decades before I was even born, of this strangest secret that everyone's following and asking questions, is why do you think people have so much fear around questions? Because like for me, questions just seem like the most logical thing. It's like I don't even think that I'm doing anything in particularly out of the ordinary. Sure, but
Because
there is so much fear about questions.
we're taught to give our power away. Oh, can I go to the bathroom?
Mm,
In elementary school, you have to raise your hand to ask for a basic need to be met.
right,
If you speak up, oh, that's not appropriate. So we have a lot of these early childhood experiences and the negative consequences that come from speaking up. And I've seen this actually too in colleges, because I went and spoke at a college last year, and I was saying, I was like, hey, like, I'm very open. I'm like, all right, everybody, like, ask questions. And they're like, they're scared.
mm,
They're afraid to speak up, to stay out of the box, or think, I think obviously it could be from childhood, but also maybe collectively too. We are taught that it's not okay to think outside the box, like follow the rules, do what you're supposed to do, or else there's going to be a negative consequence. So
right.
I think that's a lot of it.
Mm. And it's interesting that despite that negative, knowing that there's a negative consequence, I don't suppose anyone really kind of thinks how bad could it possibly be? Like, what could they do? Like, take me out? We in the West, we don't kind of live in that state as such where we get taken out for asking questions, but yet just the way that we police each other, and keep each other down by calling people crazy or labeling them the other or this, or, like things like that can really, how powerful the consensus mind is against that soul yearning. Because one thing that I've always been curious of, because anytime I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, like as in I'm supposed to be doing, not what society says,
Right.
but I know when I'm off track, it's super uncomfortable for me. It's like I feel it all over. I know that there's that voice will literally tell me that I'm lying or bullshitting myself, so it's not even anything that anybody says external to me. It's just like a
Yeah.
feeling of true discomfort. And then if I stay in a space for too long and I'm really out of alignment, then my behavior really starts to change. And I notice how, I don't know if it's like a childhood thing, but I wasn't really that kind of child, but there's this kind of like childish reaction to my environment where part of me, like I know, like a higher part of me will come and literally blow up the situation. So I have to leave. It's like if I
Yeah.
don't go,
Yeah.
like something will come and create havoc, create drama, so that it just gets to the point where I have to walk out or I get told to leave.
Right.
More times than not, I just get to a point where, okay, I've got to go. I've got to step back into what makes sense for me. And I'm just like, I can't be the only one who feels this. This is not just something that's unique to Carol. I'm sure everybody has levels of discomfort. When you're not in the right space.
But not everybody listens.
Or how do you dampen that? What, are people ignoring it, or is that
Eating, drinking, numbing out,
right?
creating drama, gossiping. I mean, the list goes on, because we blunt our emotions, right? We don't want to feel the discomfort. And that's truly what I believe also is a contributor to dis-ease in the body.
Right.
You start to get sick, your body breaks down. I know this happened to me in my last pharmacy job. I had such bad anxiety, and that was my higher self saying this is not in alignment with, health or what you should be, doing. So, but I think that a lot of times the comfort zone it's like, oh, well, that's not safe. I have to stay here because it's secure, it's predictable. Even in relationships too, like marriages, even though it's toxic, it's familiar to that person, maybe because of past programming, what they believe, their self-worth, whatever that is. So they stay. Where somebody like you, who is so in tune and sensitive to energy, you can't ignore it. So sometimes it takes people 17 years to leave a marriage. Other people, it's different for each person, but I think there's a lot of different ways that we cope with that discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Staying busy is another one,
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, and I spoke to you earlier that I said that I had to do a talk on Thursday, and the
Yeah.
talk that I was given, I'd written this talk, and it was called The Resonance of Truth, because
Mm,
it was like, I was saying truth has a frequency, and when something kind of like tweaks in, and then you literally can't ignore what it is, and how people are, the way I began it was to say that the truth has a frequency, it's a resonance, but most people are attuned to the frequency of fear, because that's what keeps us going these days. It's like, well, the fear of what other people say, but also the fear of what the media is keeping us like attached to and distracted by, the fear of what's coming down the line for us, the fear of who's going to be in politics the next day, the fear of
right.
the next kind of wave of whatever is going to come and wipe us out. There's always this kind of big boogeyman or this big thing coming. And yet still people don't think, well, if this is, if my days are numbered, why don't I do something, about it? So at least the days that I've got will be useful, because this is I don't know if you've heard this book, Bronnie Ware or Bonnie Ware. She wrote a book called The Five Regrets of the Dying. And
I saw an Instagram video with it, but go ahead. Yeah.
the number one regret of the dying was, and this is, she's sitting there, she's a palliative nurse, so she's like seeing people out.
Yeah.
And the number one that people said was, I wish I'd had the courage to be myself, and not be so concerned with what other people say.
Yeah.
And to be, to live your entire life, and then just as you're taking your last breath, you're going, actually, that's, to me, that's the most frightening thing. Like, there's no risk. For me, there was never a risk in trying to do what I wanted to do, because the risk was not doing it and thinking that I might be okay. I thought I was hedging my bets by not trying, more so than trying. I'm like, at least I can, in trying to go along the lines of all these ideas that I've had, crazy, not actually, but the experiences that I've had, and the stories that I can tell, and the skills that I've learned as a result, and the people I've
Right.
met, and so are so completely different than if I'd have just kind of done something and be good at it. I always apply myself, so I'd always be, but I would be just like deeply unhappy. I know
Right.
that.
Right.
And I just couldn't bear to live an unhappy life, even if it meant that I had to kind of put the faith out, put the work out first, and trust that the money follows, because the money does follow. But it's like a real kind of opposite way to the way that we're told that success looks like, and the way that the world works. Which is kind of why we have, like, you talking about anxiety and all of these things. It's people
Yeah.
just out of alignment with the core that's telling them, like, this is what you're supposed to do, and you're looking everywhere else but here. No wonder you feel stressed.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I think, like I said, you talked about before getting taken out, to the ego. it's survival. So if I fall out of line, or if I don't stay in this line, it does mean death to your body. Doesn't know any different. So it feels very like, it might be the fear of like, oh, rejection or abandonment or whatever. But at the core, it's like, oh, then I'm unworthy. Or then like, what is that deeper fear? It's ultimately death, because your body's trying to survive. So I think that a lot of people do live in that state because it's like, oh, well, they don't rationally think about it, but that's what your body's trying to do, is protect itself. So that's why all of these different patterns come online, like people pleasing or suppressing your needs or unworthiness and not speaking out, whatever that is, because it's a dire consequence.
Right, right.
So
Yeah. And then you went on to the unlocking stage. And what came to mind when you were saying that is that kind of limbo that you have to go through, where you're separating from there, but you're not quite maybe at the point
yep,
where everything's starting to run into, like really makes sense. And there's lots of things that you have to learn to be able to stand on your own. Like if I think about the things that I needed to learn when I became self-sufficient and went into this entrepreneurial journey, was one, how much do I charge for my time? Because up until that point, outside of doing kind of like music gigs and everything, which were different, it was I'm not working for a salary, or I'm not working for an hourly rate now. So how do I put a worth on my time? And that in itself was really hard to break through. How do I
right,
structure my day if someone's not breathing down my neck and telling me what to do? And like, how do I know this is going to work? And the constant learning and unlearning and relearning and upgrading of skills that have to happen when
right,
you're doing your own thing. And then, of course, because you're still not fully there yet, and maybe there's not even any visible visible proof of what it is that you have in your mind and you're working towards, then you've still got the people who are like safely holding on to the everyday way of being, reminding you that it's a failure, that you're not, where's your stuff, what's happening with that thing. So you made, that kind of
right.
thing. So how do you guide people through that unlocking phase, and what can you say more to that?
So like just to clarify, so what part of that do you want me to hone in on? Like dealing with the voices of people, like which part of that?
Right. I would say let's start at the beginning, where I started, where it was for me. I remember that stage in my journey was, it was limbo, it was uncharted waters,
Yeah,
and I had to learn everything, and a lot of it came from self-worth, and but as well when I'm talking about when it comes to invoicing people, and then
yes,
you know then chasing money that doesn't get paid to you, and having to like take on all of these roles and find that power within yourself. So
right.
start there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's different for each individual, although I do believe, like you said, a lot of it does come down to, especially with entrepreneurship, because you're essentially championing for your, like you said, what your time, your energy. And so kind of what I always think about is the energetic piece, but also the practical piece. So if you're wanting to scale a coaching business, I've hired so many different healers, coaches to show me the path, so that it wasn't so like, oh, I think this is the way. You learn from and model, and obviously like check in with yourself to see what aligns, but getting that practical piece I think is so important too, because then you can really anchor into something. Because I think that, if you're just like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, but you don't have any solid kind of like a path, or like, hey, your coach could be like, I've walked this before, like try this on, or like somebody can point out your blocks and blind spots of, oh, hey, like, why are you undercharging or over delivering or whatever. I think that's an important piece too, that, I know we're talking a lot about energy here, but that is such a big piece, like strategy, that kind of stuff too, because I know I had to learn that. And then also, depending on the person, like, I know for me, boundaries was a big challenge, because I I grew up believing that my worth came from giving. So like if I make you happy, if I give you a lot and overgive, then I'm going to be safe and I'm not going to get abused and I'm going to be okay. To my subconscious mind, not to my rational mind, I would never know that. So I think for me, and for each individual person, like I have a client who was like, it wasn't safe for her to speak up. So of course, when she goes to champion for her salary or to speak up about a boundary, it's not going to feel safe. So I think it's kind of working with the individual with both of those pieces, like the energetic component, but also the practical piece of, okay, you have these gifts. How do we now put it into a container that then supports you? Because think about, I always give this example of like a colander or like a leaky bucket. If your energy is just running through there and you have no boundaries, no structure, you don't have a business. So you need to have these structures in place, boundaries and standards, offers, practical things that people can then say, oh, this is how I work with her, to be able to scale and hold higher levels of wealth and clients. So I think that's what's coming through. Like we can have those energetic pieces come through of the unlocking as you become more of yourself. And it's also like, how do we now translate that into a practical offer, container, hourly rate, whatever it is that you might be doing.
Yeah,
So
like for me initially it was when I started, I was doing websites and things like that, and it was like, well, what do I charge for this? And
right, right.
how do I package that up? So that was new for me because I
Yeah.
just learned how to do all of this stuff for the sheer will of like, I want to know how to do this stuff. So I
Uh-huh.
kept hammering at it until I could do it. And then someone was like, oh, can you do that for me? How much do you charge? And you're just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it can be from the lowest level to the highest level, but then also, um, over years of having varying different experiences, is sometimes if you charge too little, you're not necessarily going to get the best client experience. That over delivering of like, I'll give them a website, but I'll give them this and I'll design their business cards and I'll do all, like
Right.
way more work than was completely necessary. And then it was never good enough. Like one person that comes to mind was, it was just never it was never right, and there was never, it get all the way to the point where I wanted to sign off on the project because everything was done. But then suddenly everything was a problem,
Right.
at that point of time. And what was interesting about that, what came to me was as I was getting really frustrated because I was trying to sign off on this and it was clear that it was finished. And I
Right.
remember having a meditation, doing a meditation that morning, and it clearly told me that she just doesn't want to let go of the project because as long as she doesn't have a website, the story about not having a business because she doesn't have a website can hang true, and
Yep.
she can be in this space of, yeah, it's coming, I haven't got it yet, I haven't got a website. But I'm like, but you have, like, and that was what
Right.
was holding her back, because now it was like, oh, my friend said this doesn't look good. And so it was like suddenly everyone around her was an expert, and it got into a weird state. And
Yeah.
interestingly, later that morning, she literally sent me a WhatsApp that was kind of verbatim, where it's like, you know what, I was just getting a bit nervous and it's fine and everything like that. So I think also when it comes to doing soul-led work is reading behind the words,
Yep.
when you and learning those other skills that, those are other skills that people don't necessarily take on board when you go into this work, because it's you have to have the practicality of it, but there's a lot of intuition and
Yep.
higher level discernment that you need to develop, or for me anyway, that has helped me
Oh
see where
yeah.
someone's coming from, especially if they start loading me with a load of problems that are happening. I'm just like, okay, what is this? Because the front part of me is just going, well, wants to go here, but I'm like, what is this really about? What are they
Right.
doing? At the beginning, everything was fine.
It's her protection mechanism because then she has to really show up.
Mm.
It's that definitive, okay, now I'm ready. And so often there's that Marianne Williamson quote, we're not afraid of our darkness, we're afraid of our light. Like now she actually has to step up and be seen. So it's that sneaky self-sabotage that's like, even with some of my clients, they're like, I'm confused. I'm like, are you really confused? Or is this just like a tactic of your ego that's like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Like I'm picturing somebody like having to go be pushed into a pool. They're like, oh, I can't. It's like, no, you're ready. Like you're going to be fine once you just dive in the pool, you know? So I agree with you. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of the, like those very subtle energetics too, that can play a part and really prevent I always call it the idea to implementation gap. Like that can be so wide if you're like, oh, I'm not ready. I can't, the fear, whatever it is that's holding you back. So yeah, I hear you.
And also using the same to discern that everyone is not your client, everyone is not for you, you know,
Yeah.
and sometimes that might be a difficult choice to make, especially when it's, you know, a good chunk of money that could come in, like could ease you financially, but it doesn't, you know, if you have that moment of, are we completely aligned, or are you trying to like shoehorn somebody in and ignoring those little kind of red flags and things that are just
Right.
feel a little bit off at the beginning? That, you know, I don't know if you've ever encountered something like that
Oh, I've
on
had to fire clients because I
Mm.
had somebody last summer who was extremely abusive. And I'm like, you're done. Here's your refund. I usually don't give refunds. I'm like, bye, cutting the cord. You're done. Like there was some mental illness there, but yeah, it's absolutely. I think that, yeah, like intuition is such an underrated gift that you can
Yeah.
use in your business.
Mm.
Um, and I think also too, setting up expectations. Like I'm always voicing, I'm like, this is the type of client that I work with, because I think then it's a little bit more clear.
Mm.
And then you as the coach, like you said, it's not just the client choosing the coach. It's like, okay, or, you know, maybe not in, depending on your industry or consultant, whatever you do, but it's like a relationship.
And then the final piece as well, the ownership and the really stepping into and showing out of your expression, whatever that may be as well. And what was that for you? Like talking about your own personal ownership of
Yeah.
yourself and really realizing what was coming through for yourself.
I'll call myself out. I still think that there's a little part of me that like I slide back and I'm like, you know, do people really get the energy stuff? Do they think I'm crazy? Because I'm also working with pharmacists. You know, not all of them, but you know, I work with small business owners, but a lot of the, like where I come from, I don't know what they think, you know? So it's like I have to really own that I talk about energy and frequency and all these different things, and you know, quantum physics and there, you know, science and all of that. There's that backing, but I think I've been called like woo woo before, and like that to me can be very triggering.
Mm.
So I think it's just realizing like this is an ever evolving process, but I think true ownership comes from being stable within yourself. So I've done a lot of nervous system work over the last couple of years, and I think that stability and that groundedness is really what comes through in your frequency and your voice when you show up, your confidence, your embodiment, and the level of leadership that you know you demonstrate, and really walking the path even if other people are hating on your path or they don't quite understand it yet. So I think it really takes a lot of courage to
Mm.
be at that level of like, I am so convicted and committed to this path, even though no one around me understands it. I think that that's, you know, really true courage.
Yeah.
But I think the embodiment piece comes from being stable within yourself, and following that mission, God, source, spirit, whatever you know believe,
Mm.
and moving from that space, and people can feel that.
Mm. And what do you use to maintain that connection and that conviction for yourself?
Honestly, meditation and being with God. And I have that close relationship to say, you know, I'm having a rough day today. Like just this morning, I'm like, I'm about to transition into a completely new area of my life. I've never been a mom before. That, you hear all these things about, oh, sleepless nights and this and that. I'm terrified. And I lean on God. I'm like, I'm scared right now. So I need you. I need your stability to, and I surrender into that, right? It's that feminine essence of me that, because part of me wants to control, right? Like, oh, well, let me just do more to get into that, like kind of the wounded masculine. But I actually need to be doing the opposite and softening into that, divine masculine presence, and just knowing like I'm a child of God. It's going to work out. But also owning my feelings about it. I think that you kind of said it before, like calling yourself out, or however you said it, when we speak the truth and when we admit it, I think that there's a higher level of power versus, oh, I'm good, like kind of pushing it off, or like that's kind of a lower frequency. I don't know if you've studied David Hawkins at all, but
Yeah,
the power versus force.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, falsehood calibrates at a lower frequency. So when we speak the truth and we take ownership of what we're feeling and what's going on, we actually become more empowered, which I think is important.
Yeah. And I think people are more open to vulnerability now, and almost if you don't express where you are vulnerable, not just to like, not to be able to just be bleeding out and oversharing for no reason, because then that just looks like someone who just clearly hasn't got anything together at all. But like even from a point of power, even when it looks like everything's together, to mention that there are moments and days, or maybe even like periods of time where you're, launching something new, when you have a mixture of like total excitement, but then almost equal like a trepidation of like, this is so new. This is kind of me stepping like out of the space of my own self. Because then I know for me, I'm always just trying to always push my own boundaries, and I know that I'm walking like a path that I can see, but then also, I'm like putting the stones down as I'm taking every step forward. But even
Right.
with that, I'm always like, am I just being too safe? Can I say a bit more here? I know when I'm kind of phoning my own stuff in,
Yeah.
really, and I see it in all the things that I'm doing. I'm like, I know that I can, there's a level of ease that I have with creating now as well. But
Yeah.
sometimes that level of ease, I know that I can like turn it up and like push it right to the edge of my own comfort there as well, that
Right.
would like bring something more out and expand more to myself as well. So it's finding that also within yourself, like if I'm talking about personal ownership, is keep pushing forward, but then also own the bits that I'm be honest with myself in all ways. It's like, am I just really just like am I just rolling it out all the time? Or
Yeah.
can I go a little bit further? What can I do to expand on that? The same with this podcast. It's like after years and many conversations, like where can I go with this so that I'm not just racking up more numbers and more conversations? Like where does it need to go? Where can I push the boundaries of the conversation, or the questions that I'm being guided to ask when I'm speaking to people, so that it's something new as well, and so that people who listen in can hear that there are other people having those conversations, or that these conversations are being had. Because if you're the only person in your peer group or family who's having these new thoughts and there's nowhere to express it, you can feel like you're going crazy. But just to hear that there are other people as like equally on the crazy train as you, but it's the crazy ones that push the boundaries, push the walls down,
Right.
and
Right.
make the changes. So the being crazy is actually good, and embrace the crazy, and also look at who's calling you crazy, because sometimes they are trying to pull you back to safety, like you said
Yeah.
before, Yeah.
Right. Right. No, and everything that you're sharing, it's bringing me back to kind of what I shared before about like, I think part of me is like but I have to own that, right? I have to own the energy and like talking about frequency, because I think that's what makes me unique.
Mm.
And I think bringing that conversation into business, into these other areas, like that's a differentiator. That's something that I feel I'm gifted at. And so, yeah, this is inspiring me, this podcast.
Yeah, good, good. I'm glad. I'm always wondering, like, am I doing enough? So I'm always questioning what I'm doing, and I always want to make sure that, I've kind of left it all out there, so to speak, when I'm doing whatever it is that I'm doing, so that I don't draw my last breath going, "Oh, well, it was okay, but it could have been better." I just don't want
Right.
that, ever want that kind of feeling of knowing that I played safe for my own for my
Right.
own for my own safety, even with me doing things that look so unsafe right now. There's no guarantee with anything, but for me there is a guarantee because I can see it. So that's the guarantee. All I need to do is keep walking towards it, and the realization of what I see in my mind may not be the end goal, but it's almost like, if I think about when I started when I was younger and like following this carrot of wanting to get into music, it may not have realized itself in the same way that I thought it would have done when I was like a 15, 16-year-old with dreams of like super pop stardom. But that journey has like taken me like way out of anything that I could have imagined. Had I've just gone, oh, it's like too, like forget about it. That's not for me. Like I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here
Right.
doing this now if I hadn't have gone that way, just following that dream. So this, where I'm at this moment, was as a result of following that dream. So it's sometimes as well letting go of the idea that it has to look like what you think it looks like on day one.
Right, right. Well, and that's a great point. It's so much of a co-creation. Like I said before, like part of me is like, because I do feel that there are some shifts happening in my business. Like, oh, I want to grip on to what I know. Like I'm a coach. This is what I do. And I think God's really shifting me in this other way now. So I think it's like part of that dichotomy too, of like, it's a co-creation and being open to pivoting, right? Like you said, and having things shift. Like you thought you were going that way. God's going to put you over there, but it's going to be better than you ever imagined. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I can totally attest to that. And I'm just like, okay, I'll just keep following, and see what turns up. But yeah, it was so good to speak to you today as well. Like, do you have any like parting words or anything that you want to talk about what you're working on right now? And then also share where we can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my goal this year is to reach 200 audiences. It's really less about the number, it's more about the impact. And I think that that's probably there was some kind of divine download that was like, do this thing, because I feel that every person's podcast or, every opportunity, I connect with so many amazing people and I learn new things. Like I wrote some things down as I was talking to you. And I think it's just like really being open, whoever's listening to this, be open to how your life is going to unfold, be open to going for like listening to that tiny voice that's telling you to do something, and not out of fear. There's a different frequency from, the fear is like, oh, urgent. Oh, I need to do this, versus there's a peacefulness. And I think a stability to, I'm being led to do this. Right. So follow that voice. And I would just encourage you. Yeah. If my frequency is resonating, you can follow me on, at the pharmacist coach on Instagram, Christina Fontana, everywhere else. I'm on YouTube. I'm just really excited to, yeah, step into the unknown. And I'm nervous too with everything that's happening, personally with my baby. But you know what? I have that faith. Like you said, I love how you said putting the stone, like you're putting those stones in front and like it's going to be built, whatever's going to happen.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christine. I've enjoyed
Yeah.
it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Christina, for sharing with me, and thank you for listening. If you want to dig into more about me, you can go to my website. It's carolmaywhittick.com, carolmaewhittick.com. You can also find me on social media, Carol May Whittick, on LinkedIn and Facebook, and Kazmic, Cazmick, on Instagram. Until the next episode, take care of yourself. Have a great week.